I'm headed out, and so my coworkers literally are the best people I've ever worked with on the planet. And crazy, fun, engaging, challenging, believe in you, all those things you guys are talking about, like my coworkers, right? So you know what they did? When I left, they got me a gift. They know I love coffee. I'm a coffee addict, so I shouldn't say I'm an addict, but I really have a lot of coffee every day. Caffeine kind of keeps me moving, keeps me focused. Anyway, so they got me a coffee card, and they got me this cup, and it says, "Good luck finding better coworkers than us." So that was the gift they gave me as my parting gift. But it's true, coworkers make or break where you are. You could work in some really hard environments. I think of some of these professions, especially right now, that are essential professions that require so much human service type work, that they're hard and there's secondary trauma and there's all these things people experience. But when you have good people surrounding you, it helps you to navigate that. And so coworkers are so important. The coworker that you are, what you bring, that is so important to the people around you. And so people are likely to stay in hard jobs and hard situations when they have really good coworkers. And so I just wanted to point that out. It was just a really fun conversation we were having over there. We're going to be talking about crucial conversations in this part. And I want to say this before we get started. We're all going to make mistakes in this area. I still make mistakes in this area. It's one that I don't think we're necessarily born with. We're not born to wake up and be able to engage in hard conversations. Some of it's our culture. You know, when I was growing up, and I mean, this is not talking bad about my family or the way I grew up, but I'm Mediterranean, I'm Greek and Italian and all that. And even though we're very expressive with our body movements and our passions and all that, feelings weren't something we really talked a lot about in my house when I was growing up. I struggled with that as a counselor, which, you know, it's funny, I'm a counselor, I work with people on that. But my experience has been that a lot of adults struggle with that whole idea of self-awareness and knowing your feelings and your emotions and things that bring to the table. We don't have time for this today, but like anger, for example, is kind of the coverall emotion. And I have an anger iceberg or anger funnel I use. And when you look at it, anger is what you see, but underneath are things like rejection, disappointment, frustration, other types of emotions. And so I think it's really important to note that too, that we're all learning. And I think for me that was part of this process of like learning to be expressive and what was okay to express, because that was part of it too. Like, you don't tell people that, you don't express that feeling or that emotion, you don't talk about that. And so you have to know that as we come into this whole concept of like, what does this practically look like? These are pieces you're bringing into this conversation. I'm bringing into this conversation, our cultural backgrounds, the ways in which we grew up. I was just talking with some pastors recently. We were talking about how in the ministry, we're taught not to tell people our problems. You're just not taught to talk about it. You just don't, because you're the pastor. You can't. So we were talking about that whole concept, and again, that's kind of a cultural belief system, right? That we bring all of these pieces into these conversations. So I want you to be aware of that as we talk today, and we bring up some of these things, and to be thinking about your own motivations. What would cause you not to engage the conversation? What would it cause you to engage it maybe in a not so healthy way? So again, having that kind of social awareness, if you will, as we talk about these ways in which to engage in crucial conversations today is really important. All right, you with me? Are you willing to do that? It's hard. Social awareness is hard. We have to admit that we might not be good at it. The way I look at it is, if we can't admit that we're not good at it, then there's going to be no change. We're not going to move towards change. And just because we're not good at it doesn't mean it's a bad thing. Or we're a bad person, or we're a bad whatever, fill in the blank. It just means that we're learning and growing, and that's part of it. So, okay. Cool. So we're going to talk about this crucial conversation. What are some of your fears over crucial conversations? What are some of the fears we have in having to engage in hard conversations? Oh, like what? What do you mean doesn't go well?
Like they start yelling, screaming, or outbursts.
Yeah, yelling, screaming. Them or you? Well, let me clarify. Okay. What are some other fears?
I think that I don't have the right words to say, or that I'm going to say something wrong.
Right.
I feel like I'm not wrong.
Right. example, sometimes you'll do whatever you can do on your end. I think that's one of the pieces of this too that I probably should have said at the beginning. All you can control is you. That's it. You're not going to be able to necessarily control the way that they respond. You can work towards managing the way they respond. Going back to your things. Yeah.
It's going to sound ridiculous, but a trepidation that you're going to be in trouble.
Oh, yeah. No, I hear that. Especially if you have somebody over you. You know? Too, right? Not just if you were the one delivering it as a leader, but also so that there's a person usually over you as a leader that you're delivering, or vice versa. If you're the employee who's going to the leader and saying, hey, I need to talk about this. So either one, yeah, for sure.
They're not going to see my point of view.
Okay.
They're just somewhere up there to get their point across, and then maybe the conversation will have the result.
Right. So no resolution. I want to come back to this in a second.
That nothing changes, you have the conversation and they say that they understand or that you understand it, and nothing changes.
I would add to that nothing changes or it gets worse.
Like I had this happen to me where I left jobs and they hired multiple people to replace my one role. Have you had that happen? And you're like, I was telling you all along. And actually, if you would have hired somebody else to do this, I might have stayed, right? Like I've had that happen too. For sure. Nothing changes worse. What else?
The ripple effect of the cause and effect of how it might affect other things.
Yes, right. Especially when your work is tied to other things. That can happen, especially if your work is tied to other things. We have multiple relationships or dual relationships. Well, we used to call them dual relationships in counseling, and now they're called multiple relationships. Where, like, for example, Sandy, like you, can I use you as an example? Sure. So you're the chamber president, but then you also have friends in the community, and those friends might be part of the chamber. So there's all these like cross-pollination relationships. We all have them, and we're in a small community, so there's a lot of that happens here. As a counselor, sometimes that's hard because you're like, oh, I can't see this client because they go to my church, or you know what I mean, or like this client knows somebody who knows somebody that I know. It would be really awkward to see this client. So same kind of thing where you've got these relationships, and then you've got this ripple effect that just not even affecting your work life; it's now affecting outside stuff. Yeah.
I'm tagging on the ripple effect because sometimes there's people you have to talk to that make it difficult on those conversations, but there are also some people who cause issues in the workplace. They don't talk a lot about things they don't know what you're talking about, and having
We have a word for that.
having a difficult conversation with those people, you're not sure how it's going to affect your relationship with everyone else as well.
Yeah.
Because they might get upset, and then who knows what they may say or misinterpret, and then it affects your relationship with others that you work with as well.
Yeah, that's great. That kind of goes with that ripple effect piece. Yeah, it's gossip a lot of times too, right? Rather than going to the source. Yeah. Other thoughts? What things that make this hard? Personally, I'm afraid to offend people. I think we live in, oh, this is going to sound bad. Hear me out. I think we live in a society where people get too offended, even in trying to have some of the crucial conversations. And I don't want to offend people. That's never my intention. But sometimes people take offense, even if that isn't my intention. Does that make sense? And I can't mitigate all of that. I can't manage all that, right? So that's hard for me personally.
One thing for me is just not knowing if I've built enough relationship with individuals for having the conversation to know that the intention is for it to be good, but not knowing if the substance underneath is solid enough to carry a crucial conversation.
Right. And that's important. So we call it rapport. And in counseling, it's really important too because we can't, I'm getting this blue stuff all over me. We can't do, I'm going home with like spur pants. We can't work with our client. We can't challenge our clients. We can't challenge their thinking. We can't even sometimes call them out on stuff that they probably should be called out on because it's really about the strength of the relationship. So we have to have the hard conversations. You've got to have, I agree with you, Katie, you have to have really strong rapport, but sometimes it's hard to, there's like, you've got to gauge it. We were talking, I think somebody on break was talking to me about that too, that piece of being able to read the person. That's part of that social awareness. Like, how are they responding? What is their face like? What does their body language look like? Right? Are they crossing their arms as you're talking to them? Are they bouncing their knees? Are they starting to sweat? Can you see their brow furrow? You know, like, right, yeah. Are they making weird faces? Like, that wasn't a weird face, I wasn't saying it, but like, are they making Are they making weird faces while you're talking to them, right? What's actually happening? How are you perceiving what's really occurring right here? Are they tearing up? Are they starting to raise their voice? Because tone is really important too. It's all part of that. So it's like almost like you have these radar, kind of out there scanning as you're working with this person to kind of regulate and see, all right, what's going on here? Because then you'll start to know, Katie, like, if the rapport isn't strong enough to handle it. And then you've got to figure out, okay, where do I go? Abort mission and regroup. That's usually my thought. I'm like, abort mission. You got to come, okay. All right, well, you know what? Let's come back to this. Let's take a break. Let's come back to it. Or sometimes I'll say, I just want to stop here. I want to know how you're feeling right now. Just in making sure I'm hearing them and not swiping through papers or reading off a checklist of things that I should be saying. Because sometimes people do that, don't do that. We're going to talk about things you could say, but don't write them down and read them off a piece of paper. It's very impersonal. It's like when you go to the doctor and you're taking notes and you're telling them about this weird, like bump you have in your arm, and you're like worried about it, and they're just like, yeah. So how long have you had it? And they're not even looking at you, like, I just want you to look at me. I have this bump on my arm and I find something and it's scaring me. Right? They won't look at you, and you're like annoyed. That annoys me. That really annoys me because it feels like you're not paying attention to what I'm saying to you, or if you're writing the whole time. Yeah.
So as soon as you start making arms and yelling at me, I'm like, this is great, we're talking.
Yes, right? Exactly.
You two would have scared me.
Yeah.
You're mad.
Yeah. You're mad? No, this is just normal. Yeah, it's hard. Or like, here's one thing I struggle with. I still struggle with it. In my home growing up, so we thought I was, my dad's 100% Greek, we thought. And then I did one of those ancestry.com things, and well, I'm more Italian than I'm Greek. I'm actually 85% Mediterranean, but I'm 50% Greek, but nobody will tell my dad because we're all afraid of how my dad's going to interpret that because he thought he was Greek. And if you know Greeks like to be Greek. So there's that. But anyways, in my home growing up, we could be having 5 conversations at one time and nobody was offended. And you could literally do this. I could in and out of those conversations, and then when I became a counselor, I realized that people are offended by that. If I'm talking over them, and even now sometimes I have to step back, like I'll catch myself in meetings and just don't say anything, hold it in. Okay, write it down. Like I have these strategies that I use because I'm so used to engaging that way. Like you said, people sometimes interpret that wrong. Or if I'm passionate and I'm animated, then people think, oh, she's mad. She's like flailing her arms. But yeah, that's a great one. Culture is a big piece. You don't want to offend because of culture and being aware of that. Other reasons why we don't have.
Sometimes I work qualified enough to have conversations.
Yeah, well, so it's more like maybe not qualification, but the self-confidence piece.
Yeah, well, I'm in HR, so I come across a lot of situations.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe something to do with like alcoholism or things that are going on with personal lives. And I haven't really dealt with that before. I don't really know if I'm qualified to have this conversation with them, but you have to because it's affecting their job performance.
Right. Yeah, that's a good one. And it's a touchy subject. It's a lot easier to talk about something else. Talk about like, so you might be addicted. No, you're not going to say that. But like in your mind, you're like, there could be like a drug addiction here, alcohol addiction. It's affecting their work, and that's a really nasty problem because, if they don't realize that they have a problem,
Exactly.
then they're mad because you're having a conversation with them.
And they're in denial.
Exactly. Right. Defense mechanisms, like we talked about. Right. Exactly. These are all normal responses to crucial conversations. I could go in a room and do this presentation somewhere else, and they're pretty much going to be the same. There's probably maybe a couple other ones on here too, but they're common responses to crucial conversations. I think one of the big things here is that we have to realize that sometimes things just get lost in translation. There's a lot of reasons for that. Sometimes it's our own cultural background, it's our own beliefs, our own values. It's the ways in which we interpret the relationship of the person talking to us and vice versa. And so it's kind of like the telephone game. You guys remember playing that game? and you pass things, and all of a sudden, you get to the end, and you're like, it's not at all what it started like, but that's what happens. And guess what? It happens in organizations. Somebody mentioned kind of like gossip going back, but that's what happens in organizations, and by the time it gets to some place, the original intention wasn't what it feels like at the end. And so you're dealing with that. And so there's a lot of noise, if you will, that kind of fills that gap between this part of the starting point and the ending point, even in a face-to-face conversation where there isn't a lot of people in between it. There's still a lot of noise that exists. And we're going to talk about some of that noise today. One of the types of noise that we experience is something called semantic noise, or the word phrase meanings. Now this becomes hard for me on two levels. I'm in this weird generational gap right now where I don't really understand all of the lingo of the younger generation, and I'm not part of the older generation, and so I feel like I'm in this weird gap, because even when I talk to students, they think now I'm old. Like a couple years ago, I was still cool, now I'm old. And, because the one thing about students is that they all stay the same age. Do you know what I mean? Because you cycle them out. So you always have freshmen, sophomores, juniors, and seniors. But you age. Okay? So you've got that piece. And so sometimes it's some of the language that we use in society that's generational, that we understand maybe because of the generation that we're in, or we don't understand because we're not in the generation. So sometimes there's semantic differences in language that we use, and that's why words are really important. Being intentional about thinking through what wording I might use, what wordage I might use. Some words have not good, we call denotation and connotation. Here's our right. Denotation is like definition, the actual definition, denotation. Connotation is the way in which the word is perceived. So, for a long time, there's a lot of words, I'm not even going to say them, but there's a lot of words in society that we used, and we would say them, and they meant different things, like not good, or, and now they're considered words that are offensive to certain people groups. So that's all I'm going to say, because I don't want to use those words. But there's certain, and here's the thing about that, they change with time. And so that's why you've got to kind of know, the language that I'm using, is this going to be clear? Is it understandable? I think, Sandy, you talked about when you were working for that doctor who was super duper smart, but when we talked to you, we always talked to you so that you understood kind of where he was coming from. And I think that's important in this, that idea of the semantics piece of not stooping down to a person's level, because I don't think you come down to a person's level. I think that you find a way to meet each other. And so finding a way to meet the person that you're talking to. I hear a lot, I'll just be really frank, I hear a lot about millennials. I'm technically not I'm a millennial, but not a millennial, because there's a whole other bracket of 3 years. I'm in this 3 years bracket. That's not a millennial, but they've grouped us with millennials because they don't know what to do with us. But anyways, all that to be said, I hear a lot of people talking about millennials, and I'm thinking, ooh, that conversation automatically, if you have millennials in your company and they hear you talk like that, you've immediately shut them down. Because I get frustrated. That's a trigger for me. Because I don't fit the stereotype of what they think a millennial is. Does that make sense? Lazy, doesn't come to work. I like to wear flip-flops to work. That would be great. You're all looking at my feet now. I watched you do that. I don't have one. But I mean, because that was a big thing. I remember a couple years ago, I think it was Time magazine or one of them had how to engage the millennial generation. Had this girl sitting on a desk like that over there with flip-flops on with her laptop or something. And I'm just thinking, okay, well, that's not really me. I like flip-flops, but I'm a hard worker. And I bring different things to the table. And I don't necessarily see class or levels as it relates to workplace. I think, there's kind of that old top-down mentality. I don't fit well in a top-down type of, because that's just not how and some of you can say, well, that's how it is. Yeah, some businesses, but a lot of more progressive businesses are no longer like that. And so I like being in an environment that doesn't see me in that top-down, you're not old enough yet to be part of the table. I don't want to be in a business like that, right? So some people might say, well, that's a millennial, they don't want to put their time in. No, that's not what I'm saying. That's not what I'm bringing to the table. And so I think we've got to be careful how you characterize generations in particular, about their work ethic and how you are conceptualizing. All of your stereotypes are going to go into this, and you will use words, not even intentionally, you will use words that are going to come out as stereotypes. And you've got to be very, very, very cautious of it because you will immediately shut people down. Because I can tell you right now, you say anything to me about my age or the fact that I'm a woman in a meeting, I'm done. Because that's a trigger for me. Because I've had people overlook me for jobs because I was a woman, overlook me for jobs because I'm young, or ish. You know what I mean? I'm not really young, I'm no younger. But, you know, so I think that idea of understanding that coming in, you've got to watch the words that you're using when you speak to people, you know? And so, the semantics, right? Word, phrase, meanings. There's psychological noise that happens, right? Our own stuff, right? So say, for example, you're working with somebody, you want to have this crucial conversation with somebody who has experienced a lot of rejection, right? So here you are, going to get in and talk to them about their work performance, and you're going to mention that they're not completing their work the way that you expected them to complete their work. How might they internalize that? Might get fired, but how are they going to, feelings-wise?
I'm not good enough.
I'm not doing a good job. It's another rejection, another form of rejection for me. So you have to understand the other person on the other side, they're bringing stuff to the table, but also you are. So what if a person speaks up for themselves? How will you receive that? What psychological noise do you have, right? Some of that is belief systems, right? I don't believe, I'm just saying. You might believe that, well, employees should never talk to a leader in a business like that, or share their opinion, or put out. That's something that you have to deal with, because if this person asserts themselves and puts that out on the table, and you're bristling because of it, where is that coming from? So there's that psychological counseling component. Where is that coming? Why are you feeling that? Why all of a sudden are you triggered in this moment? Do you feel that they are not going to be submissive to your authority and that bothers you? Right? Why is that bothering you? Have you had this experience before? Right? So you're taking that moment to kind of really dig into, why am I responding this way? Because there's that psychological noise. So understand, like, you may be saying something, they may be saying something to you, but all this stuff is happening in between. Semantics, psychological noise, we're going to talk about other ones here in a minute, that are clouding the message that you're trying to send or that they're trying to send. So I hope you're realizing, as we continue to talk, communication is really a lot of work. It really takes a lot of effort. It's very intentional. Physical noise sometimes is there's sounds, there's things that are happening. Some people are more sensitive to sounds than others. Like my oldest son is super sensitive to sound, and like he can hear like a pencil drop, and it bugs him while he's trying to work. And he's like, I can't work. So I had to buy like noise cancellation headphones because it bothered him to hear, to have that physical noise. I remember in high school, we were taking like the advanced placement physics exam or something, and they decided that they were gonna jackhammer the sidewalk outside. Well, I'm out, I'm done. I didn't pass. I was like, I can't even focus, because sometimes that physical noise is also, and if you're having renovations in your building, sometimes your building is not the best place to have a meeting. So that's another thing you have to think about. What's happening if there's physical noise that's taking place around you that actually will cloud the message. Like I've been in meetings before where I'm listening to the person, but my mind is on the fact that I can hear the blower. Like I can hear it right now. Right, that's physical noise. And so that stuff interferes with the message that you're trying to put forward. Physiological noise is a thing. Some people don't hear well at certain tones. There's a physiological component. Certain levels of voice, or even the ways in which you use your tone, right? Sometimes tone has a lot to do with, engaging. So for example, if I'm asking somebody to do something, I would say, hey, I really need you to do this, versus, hey, I need you to do this. See the difference? Right? That's an easy one, but there's a difference. And so the ways in which the tone in which you use, but also, again, some people have a hard time differentiating between tones. So that's important to know.
Or the opposite, people that are super loud.
Yeah.
Why are they always doing it?
Yeah.
We work with all the time, we're like, why is she so loud?
Yeah, that's
It's just so, nothing against her, she's just super loud.
Yeah.
I mean, it gets offensive after a while.
Yeah. My favorite is like, I'm super loud naturally, but I was trained vocally too. I studied voice for a little while, so like I don't need microphones a lot of times. And so people would use a microphone, I'm like, I don't think you want me to use a microphone. They're like, no, I'm like, so there's me. All right, I'm like, I don't really want to even use this, like I don't, because I talk to project my voice, and so I have to catch myself too in that. Or, you know, I just tell my kids, like, you're sitting right next to each other, take it down, you know. That's great, good, that's a good one, Sandy. Decoding. This is through your life lenses. I look at it this way. We all view life through a set of lenses. I just went to the eye doctor this last week, and you know, when they put that little machine up and they flop all the lenses down, you're like, is it blurry? Can you see it? You know? That's how we're viewing life. We all have lenses for how we view life. And some of that's our experiences, it's our culture, it's the ways in which we are interpreting what we're seeing, it's our experiences, you know, our worldview, right? And the reality of understanding kind of the bigger picture. All of that those become lenses that overlay, that we see the situation, that we see the person, and we engage with the person. And so you have to know that, like, what are your lenses? How are you conceptualizing people? What do you believe about people and their work ethic? What do you believe, you know, if you believe that most people are lazy, you're going to take that lens with you into a work environment. If you believe that people won't get the work done unless I micromanage them, you're going to take that. That's how you're going to view your work and your conversations with your the employees or the people that you work with. If you believe that millennials they don't do anything, that's how you're going to treat them. You're going to make jokes about that in the workplace. It's going to offend people because it's our lenses or ways in which we're conceptualizing people. So you have to know what you believe. And I try to make sure I keep that in check too. Like, I don't believe people are naturally lazy. I think there are people who have not found what motivates them to be able to make steps forward. I don't believe that. I don't believe people are naturally lazy. I think there's a motivation piece. And sometimes people are only motivated by extrinsic motivations, but a more mature way is to be motivated by intrinsic. So some of the work that I do with my students is how do I move them from extrinsic to intrinsic motivation? But again, I have to have a different belief system in order to be able to engage like that. So what do you believe about the worker? What do you believe about the cultures of people that you work with? That's going to affect the ways in which you engage in these conversations, and it becomes noise. I love this one. Part of this process we use is called a feedback loop. It's kind of checking in with your client. It's really important, client, person you're working with. I do it as a counselor, that's why I said client. We check in with them. You know, how are you feeling about this? I know what I said. It was hard. It was hard for me to say that to you. I just put that there. Just say it's hard for me to say that to you. It's hard for me to hold you accountable. It was hard for me I had a situation most recently, and somebody was supposed to do something that they didn't do, and it was right before I had to deliver something that they were supposed to have done. So I was like, oh God, I have to address it. I can't let that go. So I did it in a text, which I don't normally do because I don't like doing it that way. I'd rather be face to face. But this person, again, culturally, different generation. It was a different, and I knew I could do that. And so I said, hey, no worries. We'll be able to work through it right now. But in the future, if you can't get to it before the deadline, just let me know so I can plan for that. That's what I said. Next day, the person had the thing done. I said, hey, thanks so much. This is great. Looks great. Thanks so much. So if it happens again, I'll address it again. And that time I'll probably would address it face to face and say, hey, this happened a couple weeks ago. And I don't want to have the conversation, but I need to have the conversation. I need to hold you accountable. It's a role that I'm in, but also I want to know what I can do to help support you to be able to get it done. What can I do to help you? Is it too much? Can I find somebody to come alongside you to help you deal with it and navigate it? Right, so I'm working with them rather than against them. Okay. Okay, so you can see on slide, it's on page 11, we're talking about noise there. Actually, noise starts on 10, talks about encoding to decoding, right? When you're sending it and the person's receiving it. There's physiological processes that take place too, as that's all happening with the ear and you're sending the message to the brain and all of that. I'm not going to get into all that because it's neurological. But if you look on page 11 where it shows all the red, the idea here is that we are moving towards engaging in those crucial conversations, which helps to move us closer to decoding. So the goal here is when we're talking about spectrum of response, we're trying to find a pool of what we call shared meaning, right? So what do I want to know? Why do these people work here? Why are these people involved? Like, what's their why? Right? You lose your why, you're done. But I want to know, what's their why? Why are they here? Why not another company? Why not another school? Why not another business? Why not another place to volunteer? Right? What keeps you here? Part of that is getting to know your people. Because once you know that, it's easier to find a shared meaning with them. Like, I know you're here because you care about students. I know that's because that's what you care about that. So you work to find that shared meaning, which is part of that rapport Katie was talking about earlier. When you build rapport with clients and with people that you work with, you know that stuff. You know that they care about what they care about and what affects them. And so when we have to have the hard conversations, we do have safety around that shared meaning, right? If we can make meaning like, hey, I know you care about your work. I watched you do this awesome thing with a student, and it was awesome. You did a great job, and I could tell that the student really felt good about it, and I think that's awesome. But you also know we're here to grow. This is part of our work as professors, right? Let's use that as an example. It's part of our work as professors. We're here to grow. And so what are some areas of growth that you would like to work on this year? What are some areas of growth that you think, like right now, this would be an area for growth for me? Here's the thing. When you engage in conversations like that, they usually tell you what the problem is. That's always my favorite. You don't even have to say it. Because they'll go, I think for me, like, my time management is really bad. And you're like, oh, tell me more about that. Right? A lot of times when you can get into that shared meeting circle, they feel safe to tell you that. They're not gonna she's gonna fire me because she's my boss and I just told her my time management was really bad. Right? Because they know that you care enough about them, that you're working them towards. And so you have to create a culture of learning. When you create the culture of learning, these crucial conversations work so much better in your organizations. And we're all learning. When you model, when you made a mistake, and you stand up and you say, I made a mistake. I did wrong. I'm sorry. I should have handled that better. I should have communicated that more clearly. I didn't realize that I wasn't communicating clearly. Thank you for bringing it to my attention. That's hard to do when you're the boss, because you don't want people to think that you're weak. But honestly, can I be real talk? Can I give you real talk for a second? If you think that, you got to figure out where that's coming from. That's you. That's not them. There's insecurities about your role. You got to figure out why that's coming from. Because the reality is that when you can stand up, that's modeling good leadership. I made a mistake. So hopefully, when my employee or the volunteer has made a mistake, they'll step in my office and say, Charity, I made a mistake. Okay, let's talk about it. I'm here. I'm listening. How can I help you? Right? So you create this culture. It's a different culture. And honestly, it's not normal. It's not what you're used to. For some of you, this is like probably almost even like a foreign concept, because maybe you've never seen that before. How many of you have bosses that have actually apologized? A couple of you? Yeah, like 2 or 3 of you out of all y'all, right? So that's the reality. Like a lot of times that's what happens, because there's this expectation. The bosses don't do that. People in leadership don't do that. But the reality is that's that transparency y'all were talking about before on the first page. I made a mistake. I didn't handle this right. Or hey, I realized after talking to you that I did not like my tone, and I apologize for that. That was not my intention. I care about you. I care about what you bring to this table. I value the things that you know, and I'm sorry if I made you feel like I didn't, because that wasn't my intention.
And in that culture, I think it's all, at least I have found that it's beneficial if, so many times with the performance reviews.
Oh, yes.
It's once if it actually gets done. And if you can provide constant feedback,
Yeah.
I think as the person that has to do the evaluation, you're in a better spot if they're telling you things that you feel open to hear it. And then if it's, you know, hey, if the only time you've spoken to someone is to say you did a horrible job and let me tell you why, they're not gonna be very open to hearing it.
Exactly.
If it's been a constant feedback both ways, you're open to hearing, which I think is a good thing as the supervisor to say, well, I provide a service to you, why don't you tell me how I'm doing? And I mean, I've had folks that say, oh, you're doing an awesome job, because you can just see they shut down and go, I'm not gonna tell you anything about your service because you'll fire me. And I've had some folks that probably went overboard and said, boy, you do an awful job, and you go, oh, let's work on that. If it's a constant feedback loop, and you change that culture, people are willing to hear what you have to say, and you're willing to hear what they have to say back. And that's probably been the best thing that I've learned in, I don't know how many years now being a supervisor.
Snaps for you, that's awesome. Yeah, and I think a part of this is, it's preventative rather than reactive. Can we talk about that for a second? I think it's real easy in businesses and stuff to be reactive because something happens. But if you set a culture up front, this is the expectation. We're going to share back and forth. I'm going to give you X amount of times a year, or this is how we're going to deal with feedback, whatever that looks like for y'all. You know, you're going to come up with that system, and you put that in the culture that's expected. Here's what I tell people. As a leader, I don't want anybody to be surprised by the things that I'm saying in these crucial conversations. They should already know even when I start to address them. Why? Because we've already had these. They know culturally this is what's expected, right? They know that as a business, these are our values, you know. And as a church, my husband and I are church planting here in the area, and as a church, they know our vision. They know our mission, so that when something is out of line of that, and we come back, they're like, yeah, it's out of line with vision. Yeah, it is. And it's less, it's very empowering when you give them the tools and they know up front. It's kind of like you ever worked for a boss who you didn't know their expectations, and you're like, oh, I don't know what to do, I don't know what to say. And you feel like you're like in this weird dancey, like, maybe you guys remember Seinfeld? Remember when Elaine used to dance? She used to do this weird, like, jerky movement type stuff, you know? That's what I feel like sometimes when I'm working with bosses, that there's not an expectation, or you don't know what the expectations are, and then it makes you uncomfortable, and then it makes me stressed out, because I am like, I'm a doer. So I'm the checklist guru. If you came to my house and you saw my desk, because I've been working from home at a desk in my office and stuff, you saw the to-do list and the checklist, you would be like, how do you even keep that organized? But my brain is like that, and I need to check off stuff. That's part of just me feeling motivated to get work done. I'm sorry, I know that about myself, it's what it is. But I don't like it when I don't know what's expected of me, because then I feel like, am I meeting the expectations? And then you just never feel like, and you're waiting for the bomb to drop. That's what I call it. It's like it's gonna drop, and they're gonna tell me that I'm not meeting the expectation. Does that make sense? But if they know up front, if you've created this culture, by the time you get into to do that yearly performance review, it's going to be a piece of cake. Because there's already goals you've been working on, probably, things that you can already include. I do that when I do, I oversee practicum students for counseling. And so we have rubrics to assess their skills and stuff, and I have them do an evaluation. Most of the time, they've already pulled out all the stuff on the evaluation that they need to work on that I've already marked. So it's no surprise when we sit down. And they're like, yeah, am I congruent? Yep, I actually marked congruence too. Tell me more about that. How do you want to move forward? How do you want to get better at congruence in the ways in which you do counseling skills? They already know that information. So I'm surprised.
Well, I find that it allows you to stick to the facts, because like what you were saying, they're going to bring the facts up, and you can kind of take the emotion out of it. I mean, there's still going to be some, and you might have to veer off to, well, how can I help you with that, or how can you help me with this, or this upsets me and this is the trigger. But then really it always comes back to, but this didn't get done. And this is why it needs to get done. And so you can always focus it back on that, and a lot of the emotion drops away, and now it becomes, let's work together, like you said, whatever, I don't use the term cool chirping, but I mean, same thing, that it gets you to the point of what needs to get done, got done, and in the right way.
Yeah, I think that's a big piece of this. So let's work to be preventative rather than reactive in these crucial conversations. You can prevent having to have some of these conversations, or at least the heat in them, because you've already established a prevention, ways in which you're engaging preventatively. And a lot of that is vision, it's culture of an organization. There's a lot of really good research and books on cultures of organizations. I would encourage you, because a culture of an organization can make or break it, period. Because when push comes to shove, it won't stand in the middle of when it doesn't have healthy culture. People aren't gonna stay, people are gonna be burnt out, they're gonna be unhappy. You guys know that, you've probably worked in organizations that have bad cultures and you're exhausted and you don't wanna be there. And so culture is so important. I think these crucial conversations stem off of that. So going backwards, maybe even evaluating your work culture now. Might be conversations with some of you to have maybe in some of your reviews, you know, or if you have rapport with your boss or your head leader, to be able to sit down and say, hey, I've been thinking about some stuff, you know, like ways in which we can increase our culture, our morale here. That's a big one. Like sometimes organizations have terrible morale. I want to increase morale. I want people to want to come to work. Like it's exciting for them to engage and produce. And I want them to be motivated to do that. What are some things we can do as leaders to work towards that?
I think one of the most difficult, and I know several people in here are nonprofits too, but
Yes.
the hardest part of like an organization like ours is our board of directors changes. My boss changes every single year. Our volunteers changes. We only have 3 staff, two and two halves really, because we're 2 full-time, 2 part-time. So it's like we're so outnumbered by our board and our volunteers that our culture is it's ever changing. Like almost, and sometimes we just have to sit down and go, so are we doing good or do you know if we're doing good? Do you know? You know, and really have to be really serious about saying, you know what, let's find things to celebrate.
Exactly.
Because we don't really know, and a lot of times you get the negative more so than quicker than you'll get the positive responses. So it's that constantly changing culture that we deal with mostly.
Well, I think one of the things about even constantly changing culture is that, so I'm looking at my watch when we came in LA, I was like,
No, I'm fine.
couple of years ago. No, you're okay. I think one of the things too, Sandy, about changing culture is that a culture may change, but vision and mission shouldn't. Right? So the vision and the mission should stay the same, and it should be so concrete that people know it. Like one of the things we've been doing with our church leaders right now is like every meeting we have, somebody has to recite it. Like they have to memorize it so that they know it. So that way it becomes part of everything that we do, and we always go back to it. Right? Same when in leading other things I've led. Like we've always gone back to vision and mission. So even though you have this shift of people and kind of a rotation, you have kind of an anchor, if you will, because that vision and mission becomes your anchor for what you're doing or what you're producing as an organization. Does that all make sense? So even if you have shifting culture because of the changes, you can create things that are versatile too. Like you said, celebrating the wins. I like to do that once a month in a meeting. I'm like, okay, actually we used to use the snap cup. Do you guys know what that is? Okay, so it's gonna sound really bad. I love Legally Blonde. I think it's like one of I love her, she's funny. And it's just fun. So anyway, she has this thing called a snap cup, and in the snap cup, it's like you put in words of encouragement for people. And so she it looks like a big wine glass essentially, but we would decorate it with like, we bedazzle it and stuff. And then we would, sometimes we would just do fun things like if a person was a candy bar, which one would they be? Oh, well, they are Snickers, because I love all the time that they make me laugh, you know? Or we would do stuff like that to kind of encourage. And so we put words of encouragement, so that was the way we celebrate. So what they would do is we would pull it out and we'd read it in front of everybody. It was a word of encouragement in front of everybody. And then we'd snap for them, which is where I got the snap set from, right? And that was the way in which we can, so it's little traditional things that you guys have that even as you are changing your board of directors and your people, that you can kind of pass it on from generation, if you will, to generation of leaders in the organization. So find things that it can be kind of like anchors, if you will, that even as it shifts, there's things that just become part of who you are as an organization. It's really quick. So you guys would love Snapchat over here. We'll have to make them. So here's some things. So we talked about whole shared meaning and the safety piece. Here's some two other things I think that are really important to address. So it's a spectrum, right? So you've got violence on one side and silence on the other. Silence can be helpful, but it can also be damaging. Silence in the sense of I'm not going to address it. Have you ever worked for a boss who would not address something that you're like, why the heck would they not address that? and you're like sitting there, I struggle. I struggle real bad with that because I'm like, this is gonna kill this department. It's like a weed that grows and will strangle if you sometimes you have to make those hard decisions. So silence is not healthy when it comes to stuff like that. And so you've got to be able to deal with that. Withdrawing, we talked a little bit about this when we talked about defense mechanisms, right? And just kind of like pulling away and not wanting to actually engage those conversations. We got to be careful. We move from controlling to labeling to attacking. We got to be really careful in the words we use. We're going to talk about I statements here in a minute, but we've got to be able to use language that is inviting, rather not like, there was a video I was going to show you, but we couldn't get the thing to work, but in the video, this guy is telling this lady, like, she's not doing her job, essentially, and he can't do his job because she's not doing her job. And so he's like, well, and I was bristling as I was watching. I was going to show it to you in the beginning, and I was going to get your reactions, because I wanted you to tell me how you're feeling right now, because I know most of you probably were like, oh, because that's how I felt when I watched it. It was like 1.5 minutes of agony, you know, because you're like, no, this is not going to go well, you know. So the reality is watching, again, that we don't want to label, we don't want to attack, the goals of control, we've talked about, control versus management. There's a difference between those two terms, and you missed that. We talked about the difference between control and management. Now it's okay for this, where you talk this stuff. So, you're sweet, I love it. So, okay, here's what I want you to do. I want you to take a minute, you have your worksheet, before we move into some practical language, and I want you to think of a conversation you had recently that went terribly wrong. Is that what that okay. 23. Okay, perfect. 23. I want you to think about a conversation that you had that went terribly wrong. And you walk out and you're like, that doesn't go well. You're like, oh, that's not what I wanted. That was I just weird. Okay? It could be you or the person you went to, it could be silence, both, whatever, violence, whatever that looks like. Here's some possible scenarios. A person who constantly annoys you know who they are, you probably just thought about that person. Okay. An ongoing frustration at work or home, a situation where you blew up, a time where you let someone down and became upset, a time when someone insulted you, a leader who isn't walking their talk, and someone who is creating problems for you. Some of you had some of those, you're talking about coworkers, or not current ones, but you're talking about just coworkers. So think about a situation. I want you to do that. You have a situation in mind? Y'all have a situation in mind? Okay, I want you to work on this little word. It says fact, story, feeling, action. I want you to work on filling that out as it relates to the situation they've had. What was the fact? You don't have to write the whole story out. Maybe how you were interpreting the fact. Because the reality is we interpret the facts. Again, remember talking about the lenses. And then your feelings, the feelings that you had, and then the actions that you took. So probably your action was going to be I blew up, or I kind of sunk in, whatever that looks like for you. Okay? So I want you can fill that out I want you to talk in your tables and talk about the situation as you fill it out, okay? So you can kind of talk about it. We'll take about, 5 minutes or so for that.
Just follow